So we have done our gray work on this Challenger Renaissance pistol. It was not in too bad a shape. It had some pitting on the barrel, which I polished out before we did the gray work. Had some pretty good pitting in the back strap here area. It had a lot of pits right in this area here. And those had to be polished out before we could do our gray work. Now the gray work, we didn't show too much about it back there as we were doing it, but this is the way they do them at Browning, unless they've changed it over the years, but I doubt it. They probably still gray them like that down there. We put it in the glass bead machine with a number 13 glass bead, which is a real fine bead. And we turn the machine down to 30 pounds or so, and it just lightly will frost the metal. It doesn't have any effect on engraving whatsoever. It doesn't do a thing to it. And you can see the engraving is all sharp and crisp. And we bead blast that metal, and that gives it a, excuse me, a dull, frosty look. And then you'll notice that this has a shine to it. We have sprayed an epoxy over it. Now, in the early days, they used lacquer, and that's what cracks and gets the little red streaks all through it. When the old lacquers get hard and break and they get brittle, the new epoxies don't do that, but they look the same. So the metal is protected. If you were to just bead blast it and leave it, it would rust up in no time at all. So that metal has to be protected, and so we have done so by spraying our baking epoxy on there. And there again, we do bake it too, because that makes it really tough and durable. So now it's time to put it back together. We polished it, we have graded it, and we're going to start by putting our barrel retaining screw in place. Remember, we had this little rubber washer that holds this in place so it doesn't fall out, and we put that in the gun like so. I think I'll thread it up on it. It's best to do that. Thread up on this little fiber nylon washer as much as you can. Then you just drive it in. And that way your screw won't fall out when you go to remove your barrel. So like so. And put it in place and then drive it in. Now your screw is retained in there and can't fall out. If I can hardly even get it to move now. So there it is. It won't fall out. It's in place. Now let's put our barrel together first. I don't know. I just have a technique. I do things a certain way. I don't know why. Let's put the barrel together, and we do that by putting our rear sight back on. And this thing was Loctited. It was pretty tight, and so we burred it a little bit, getting it out, and we straightened all that out. So we put our rear sight in. All right, that's really about all that goes on the barrel. This little cam, I never did take out. It's staked in place, so I kind of like to leave them that way. That way they don't fall out on you. Let's put together our slide next. Notice all the engraving. It's sharp and crisp. Let's begin by putting in our extractor. This extractor is hard plated, so we didn't have to gray it or do any gray work. We put in our plunger. There's a little flat on this plunger. That goes down. This is your extractor spring and plunger. And sometimes you can just push them in and they'll snap into place. Just push it in and it snaps in. Now, sometimes that does not work. More often than not, for me, it doesn't. So I push it back into place. I'm holding back my spring and plunger, and then I just snap in my extractor. And my extractor is now in place. Now, let's put in our firing pin. Next, our firing pin and a spring. And remember, this was held in by a roll pin. And we talked about they're a little difficult sometimes to get out, but they go back in pretty easy. So just put your little roll pin in, your firing pin retaining pin, kind of in position there, and then give it a little tap just to kind of hold it in place. Then push in your firing pin. And make sure you have the slot rotated correctly. And just push it in with something that will hold it in place. And hopefully it doesn't jump out on you and shoot across the shop. So, it has a little bow on it. Okay, now we're ready to put it in. And we do that like so. We just push it right into place. Then we tap down our little roll pin, our retaining pin. Okay, and our firing pin is in place. Tap it down flush. All right, our slide is together. We have the extractor in place. We have the firing pin in place. Make sure the firing pin is free. It's good. Now, it takes a little more work to put the frame together. However, after you've done a few thousand of them, they go pretty fast. Let's begin with our trigger. And the trigger goes in the way it came out. Remember, it kind of rolled out. We're going to roll it into place. Our trigger rolls in. Line it up. Put in your trigger retaining pin. Now, that pin's pretty loose in there. So it's not going to go anywhere because the grip is going to be holding it in place. Now, next, let's put in place. Now this is our slide spring and plunger, which goes in our slide like so. Now let's put in our mainspring next. Remember, it's a double mainspringer. Now put it in place by just putting it down in the hole. Make sure that you got all the sand and crud out of that hole. I blew it out good, but I always like to just just to make sure everything's out of there, I like to take a little drill bit and kind of run it in there. And spin it around a few times. Make sure I've gotten all that sand out of there. And that drill bit's a little tight. Get it smaller. Run it in there, make sure you got all that sand out. I can feel a little bit of something in there. Yeah, there's a little bit down in there. I'll break it up. Got to blow all that out of there. The bead blast process works really well for graying, but get all that sand out of there. All right, time for our mainspring and its guide. Put it down in place. You're going to need a punch. I don't like that punch, but it'll work here. Let's push this down where we can capture it. There's this hole in the side is where you capture your mainspring. Push it into place, and then capture it with a punch. Now, it's time to put in our safety, which rotates, goes right in this hole like so. And then our hammer goes in right next to it. The hammer goes, you can just tell by looking, here's your notch in the back where it cocks, and also you can see which way it goes. And you slide it down into place next to the safety, and make sure your strut goes down into the mainspring guide. You're going to have to be like a contortionist sometimes to get all this all in at one time. Hold that in place and push it down in. And this hammer, the safety has to be right where it is. Okay, our strut is lining up. It's going down into the position where it belongs. And then we bring it up, and we're going to put in our hammer pin, which also goes through the safety. And you have to remember, with this hammer pin, there's a groove cut in it, and that has to be up, because that has a function that we'll talk about in a little bit. So put your hammer pin in place. Hammer, safety, and everything have to line up. If it's causing you problems not going in, it went through the safety, it's got to go through the hammer now, and it's not lined up. Here, I see how it is. And sometimes on these you got to have like an extra hand, it feels like, to get in there and get things where you want it. All right. So it's trying to go I can get it in exactly position where it belongs. Just a matter of tinkering with it. It's just almost like there. It looks better now. There it goes. All right, once you get the hammer safety lined up, it'll go right in. Okay, so now let's drive down our little pin, but we're going to drive it all the way in. We're going to go drive it down just about to the groove. Now remember that pin had a function. If I haven't lost this little slide return spring, I haven't. And that clips onto that groove. And so that goes in to the groove like so, and snap it in place. Then the rest of the spring comes up and will rest on that shoulder there. Okay, next I put in my sear. And this little arm on the sear goes out to the other side, and you slide it right down in between the spring and the hammer. Your sear spring and your hammer are in place, and so you just slide it down in between them. That's the easiest way I have found to do it. I can go ahead and get this punch out of my way. I make sure that the strut is against the guide, the follower, and get that out of the way. Now that's captured the strut and the guide are all in place. All right, now I can see a little better. I can put my sear down into position. Okay. Push it down. And just push it down till it lines up. And it's sort of close. There it is. It's coming in. Okay. Same thing here. We have another pin that has a little groove in it. That goes up. That has a purpose. Tap it in, drive it down to the groove. And you can tell when you're in place pretty much because they'll be just flush over here pretty much. Now, we have, here's our slide return, our slide hold open latch. We'll put that in last, but here's this plate, our little plate that goes on, our cover plate goes on the side. That is your detent for your safety. Here's your little cutouts. That's a detent for the safety. It can only go one way, big hole, small hole. You slide that in to position right under the safety and right over the pins and tap it in place. And that safety will hold all that in place. Pop it up and it'll hold it in place. So we're good to go there. Now let's, we have our trigger in place. Let's put our link in place. Goes into the trigger and up against the sear. And remember, our little V spring goes in like so. And I'm not going to put that in just yet because I want to, they have a tendency to jump out. And I want to put one more part in. That's my magazine latch. And this is plastic there again. Don't try to glue that. Don't try to glue any of these parts here. They're plastic. So put your spring in place. Sometimes I put a little Vaseline on that spring just to kind of hold it in place so it doesn't jump out on you while you're trying to put it in position. And just slide it in. And you have to look down in there to see when you're lined up. And rather than trying to, put my pin in from here and all, I just try to capture it with a punch. Make sure everything's right. I got it. Now, go ahead and put your pin in place. Okay. All right. Now, these two pieces like to fall out on you until you get your grips in place. And the grips, here's your sear spring. Snaps in like so. There, it'll come out on you if you're not careful, but the grips will hold it in place. And put your slide hold open latch in place. We didn't clean that up too well. I'm going to pull it back out and clean it. Let's and now your little spring, fine little spring, comes up over the top of and goes into this groove right there. And this snaps into place. Now it's loaded, this spring. Now, we're ready to put our grips on. Now, I haven't put my escutcheons back in yet. We grade those, remember, because they were rusty also. And I haven't put those in place yet. And they're a little tricky. They have to go into where they look right. And sometimes I have to even do them a couple times unless I'm lucky. You just kind of guess at it. So it took me a little while to get those escutcheons in. I don't generally take them out, but this time I had to. So anyway, you got to get them just right so they lay flush with the grip. And I got them, finally got them in there. I had to turn the camera off so you couldn't hear all the bad things I was saying about them. I'm going to put a few little drops of oil where they need to be on the slide. Here and there. Not too much. Oil just attracts grease and dirt. You don't need a lot. Okay. Should be ready now to roll these grips back on. Remember, they rolled off, they roll back on the same way. They go like so. They rotate forward. See, it covers all your pins and everything is held in place. Your little springs are all held in place now by the grips. And the grips on this gun were not bad at all. It just, somehow or other, it got wet. And it did a number on it. It didn't do it any good at all. And now let's put our grip screw in. The grip screw's not quite lined up. Feels better now. Okay, felt like it caught that time. Oh, careful. Don't go jabbing your finger or your grips. Those grips got to be on all the way or your screw won't go in. And that screw is not going. I want to be careful. I don't want to run out and hit my grip. I don't want to run that through my finger either. Oh, there it went. Jump down all the way in. Push my escutcheon out. Should go now. Sometimes certain things just don't cooperate. And there it goes. I can feel it pulling the escutcheon in. Tighten it down. It will pull your escutcheons into place. Oh yeah, they look good. And your screw is fit, so rotate it around to where it's like it should be. Like so. About right there and there. I got rid of that rusty escutcheon. Okay. Now, put on your slide. Cock your hammer, makes it easier. Get safety on. And now it's time to test your hammer. See if everything works. Cock it. Make sure it works. Check your safety. Okay, it works. All right. Hammer down. Put on the slide. And just slide it right back in. Put in your slide spring guide into the little hole in the back of the frame, right there. And then it should just slide right on, like so. Slide it back and put up your slide hold open latch to hold it in place. Now careful, don't knock that down, it'll shoot out on you. Make sure your cams are in this position right here. Have kind of a 45-degree angle. That way they will cam right into this slot in the frame, like so. Cam right down in there, into place, and then tighten your screw, your barrel retaining screw. And that will pull your barrel down into position. Okay, we're getting there. I can feel that barrel coming into position. Snug it up. Okay, your barrel's on. Now when you pull back your slide, it will release your slide hold open latch. And it'll go. And then dry fire, make sure the disconnector is working by holding the trigger, pulling the slide back and releasing it. Then you should have to release that trigger. Make sure it's disconnecting. And that's basically all there is to it. We put our magazine back into place, which is plated, hard plating, so it's not going to go bad. This gun looks so much better. When I first got it, it was real rusty down in this area. All here, we have polished that out and graded it. And it looks really good. It all looks factory again. No one's ever going to know that the gun's been refinished, because that's just the way it's done. And there it is. The gun looks, the metal looks like new again. The pitting has been removed. It's grayed. We've inked the engraving. I say ink. You can use ink or paint. We use paint generally. And we have sprayed our baking enamel over to protect it. And the little gun is in good shape now. It looks like a new one. The grips are in good shape. We'll put that gun on the market and hopefully make a few bucks on it. So that's all you have to do to gray a Renaissance Challenger.